Hi folks, welcome to another episode of Just Off the Highway. I'm Prodgers, and again I'm visiting hidden gems of history in our landscape. Today's episode features stories of war, and it does mention drinking alcohol. So if you're sensitive to those issues, this one might not be for you. But if you're okay with that, come along on this trip. I'm going to talk about just a few of the connections between Ireland and the history and culture of South Africa. Our two countries have a lot in common. Let's take a quick flip through the brochures. Both are ancient places with dramatic landscapes. Both are also home to young, fragile political settlements. Both are home to myth and mystery, with legends of magical little creatures that can cause plenty of mischief. But wherever I've traveled, I don't think I've ever met people who like a good story more than the Irish. I'm on the road that leads towards Vryheid in KwaZulu-Natal. I recently discovered that Louis Botha, the first Prime Minister of the Union of South Africa, the famed Boer general and statesman, met his wife and married her in Vryheid. And her name was Annie Emmett. She was Irish. There's our first connection right there. Once again, stories just seem to be all around you. When you drive through our country, you practically have to swerve to avoid them like potholes. But today I'm heading into Volksrust. It's our main destination. It's a historical battlefield that's just a couple of hours drive away, that also has some surprising Irish connections. And by the way, I don't claim that this video is chronological or comprehensive or even very coherent. I just hope you'll let it unfold through conversations, like they did for me. And because they're Irish, some of these conversations start in a pub. Now, years ago, I was working on a farm in Ireland, near a village called Dunshaughlin in County Meath. And after work, some of the farm lads invited me for a drink at a place they called the Shabeen. And I immediately thought of a South African Shabeen, you know, a bit secret, semi-legal at best. But instead they took me to this beautiful pub with an Irish name. Shabeen. And then it took me a couple of pints and some conversation, and I figured out that that's how the Irish pronounce it, Shabeen. And I realized that I learned how to speak Irish ages ago, because we South Africans just hooked that word Shabeen and used it without even realizing it. There's another Irish connection, Murphy's Law. You drive 300 kilometers outside of Johannesburg into the middle of nature just to get stuck in traffic. So okay, we're almost at the place that I want to show you today. It's the battlefield of Majuba Hill. Quick historical background to the battle. In 1877, the British annexed the independent Zuid-Afrikaanse Republiek, also called the Transvaal, for the reasons that the area needed strong and stable government, and which probably had nothing to do with the enormous discoveries of quantities of gold and diamonds in the region. So for 3 years, relationships worsened until the Transvaalers declared themselves a republic again, and they took up arms against the British Army garrisons in their country. This was sometimes called the Transvaal Rebellion, or the Eerste Vryheidsoorlog, depending on who's telling the story. It only lasted 3 months, and the British were beaten badly. Okay, up ahead of me there is the place that I wanted to bring you today. It's the battlefield of Majuba Hill. Now, some history books call it Majuba Hill, some call it Majuba Mountain. I'm in the process of climbing it right now, and I guarantee you it is actually a mountain. Battle of Majuba in 1881 is the last major battle of the war, and it resulted in a celebrated Boer victory. Now, there are already fantastic documentaries on the battle on YouTube, so I won't go into the details. But what has this hill got to do with the Irish? Okay, stay with me, we'll get there. Because the battle was fought when the British forces tried to force their way up from the colony of Natal into the territory of the Transvaal. Majuba Mountain was an important strategic point in their way. Their leader was also the governor of Natal, General George Pomeroy Colley, who was Irish. There's the connection at last. Now, I'm not claiming that Colley was defeated because he was Irish. He was inexperienced and he was under pressure. He'd already suffered 2 defeats at the hands of the Boers, so he really had no reason for his supreme overconfidence when he led his men to the top of this hill and declared, "We could stay here forever." Unfortunately for him, he was almost right. He was killed on the spot, and his forces were heavily defeated. He paid the ultimate price for his place in the story. Colley's defeat caused the British to negotiate for an end to the war, and the peace negotiations took place in a little farmhouse just below this hill. That's where we have the next important Irish connection, because this is the actual house. It's called ONeills Cottage. This place had been used as an emergency hospital for battle casualties, and then later as a venue for the peace negotiations between the warring parties. O'Neill, the owner, was of Irish ancestry. Now, interestingly enough, in isiZulu, the name Majuba means the hill of doves. And in Celtic symbolism, doves also signify peace and healing. And here's this cottage built by an Irishman, filled with Celtic tradition, that becomes both a healing place, a hospital, and a place of peace, where the peace treaty was signed. General Colley and O'Neill's Cottage, both significant Irish touch points in our history. But the peace was uneasy and resentful. Majuba also set in motion a series of events that would change the course of world history. So I'm on my way back to Johannesburg. Within 5 years of that peace treaty, the discovery of the world's largest gold deposit on the Witwatersrand leads to a gold rush, more fascinating Irish people come to the reef, and then there was the Second Anglo-Boer War, with Irish forces fighting on both sides. And eventually those events here in South Africa resonated even in the Irish Easter Rising of 1916. Of course, it is impossible to assert that one thing definitely causes another, but I think there's a kind of alchemy involved. So in the next episode of Just Off the Highway, I'll feature more of those strange Irish characters and connections. Please remember to like and subscribe to get notifications of each new edition. And if you're really enjoying these stories, why not leave me a cup of coffee on buymeacoffee.com/Prodgers, and I'll keep making more of this kind of content. Cheers.